Imagine a single man quietly walking the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., handing over the secrets of the United States to its most formidable enemy. Imagine an officer entrusted with the highest intelligence being the very person orchestrating some of the greatest betrayals in modern history. This was Kim Philby, a British intelligence officer whose loyalty was never to his country, but to the Soviet Union. Through charm, intellect, and audacity, he became one of the most infamous spies of the 20th century. A man who infiltrated MI6, manipulated American intelligence, and undermined Western operations for decades. His actions caused the deaths of countless agents, compromised vital missions, and reshaped the course of the Cold War. Few spies in history have held such power over nations without ever firing a gun, yet changed the fate of thousands with a pen and a letter. Harold Adrian Russell Philby was born in 1912 in Ambala, British India, a child of empire and intellect. His father, St. John Philby, was a man of legend, an explorer and advisor to Ibn Saud, whose exploits spanned the deserts of Arabia. Young Kim absorbed both the grandeur and the danger of his father's world, learning to navigate complex human relationships with patience and observation. His mother, Dora, provided structure and discipline, but her strictness contrasted with the freedom he experienced under his father's guidance. By the time Kim reached adolescence, he had developed a magnetic personality and a sharp intellect that would later allow him to charm allies, deceive colleagues, and evade suspicion for decades. He was a boy raised to observe the world critically and question loyalty, yet also trained in the manners of high society, a combination that would become essential in his secret life. Philby's formative years were shaped not only by family, but by history. The world around him was changing rapidly. The British Empire was still powerful, but cracks were appearing. Socialist and communist ideas were gaining influence across Europe. Philby absorbed these currents with keen interest, seeing in them a moral framework that justified rebellion against what he considered injustice. He began to read voraciously, studying politics, history, and ideology, as though preparing for a life far beyond conventional expectations. At Cambridge, he would find both the intellectual rigor he craved and the ideological comrades who would become the first pieces in a complex web of espionage. At Cambridge, Philby joined the Communist Party of Great Britain and immersed himself in radical circles. The Soviet intelligence service NKVD had begun recruiting promising students from elite universities, and Philby's combination of charm, intellect, and conviction made him an ideal candidate. To those around him, he appeared brilliant, loyal, and disciplined, but beneath the surface, he was already living a double life. He learned early the art of social engineering, the subtle manipulation of trust and perception. Every conversation, every relationship became a tool, a means to an end. By the time he left Cambridge, he was both a prodigious intellect and a trained agent capable of operating undetected within the very institutions he would later betray. Philby's first field experiences came in the Spanish Civil War, where he posed as a journalist reporting on the conflict. In truth, he was gathering intelligence for Moscow recruiting agents and relaying information that would alter the strategies of Western governments. The war tested his nerve and skill, placing him in dangerous political and military environments. He learned to operate under pressure, to act with apparent innocence, while performing acts of high-risk espionage. Every handshake, every report, every note carried consequences far beyond his own life. It was here that he began developing the audacity and confidence that would define his career. When World War II engulfed Europe, Philby's trajectory shifted. He joined British intelligence M116 and rose rapidly through the ranks, becoming a trusted officer with access to sensitive information. His assignments placed him in direct collaboration with American intelligence and NATO planning operations, giving him unparalleled reach. For Moscow, it was a gift of unprecedented magnitude. Philby passed along detailed reports on strategic plans, recruitment operations, and agent identities. Entire missions were compromised without anyone suspecting the quiet man, who always seemed loyal, was in fact orchestrating betrayal from within. Philby's genius was in the invisibility of his treachery. He cultivated friendships with key figures, earned the trust of superiors, and even shaped policy discussions while secretly undermining every effort. He became the very definition of a double agent, a man whose intellect, charm, and conviction allowed him to manipulate the fate of nations. By the time he arrived in Washington, D.C. as part of the British liaison mission, he was no longer just a spy. He was a weapon whose reach extended across the Atlantic. It is said that during his years in America, he delivered intelligence that cost lives, exposed operations, and altered the strategies of governments without ever firing a shot. Even as he gained fame for competence and loyalty, Philby's shadowy work continued undetected. His rise was meteoric because he was careful, calculated, and supremely intelligent. Each promotion was a victory for Moscow, each compliment from a colleague a further tool for deception. Yet living this life of constant duplicity carried immense psychological pressure. Philby was forced to maintain a perfect public persona while managing a network of lies, betrayals, and clandestine operations. The tension of this life would follow him for decades, bringing him face to face with suspicion and the ever-present threat of exposure. The story of Kim Philby is not just one of espionage. It is a story of how a single man's brilliance, duplicity, and conviction could infiltrate the highest levels of power, deceive allies, and change the course of history. It is a tale of ideology, morality, and human complexity, a cautionary reminder that in the shadowy world of spies, appearances are always deceptive and loyalty is often a mask. As Philby's influence grew across Britain and America, the walls of secrecy began to close in. Investigators were noticing patterns, colleagues were beginning to question, and the Cold War had only just begun. How long could one man maintain a life built entirely on betrayal before it all came crashing down? By the early 1940s, Kim Philby had firmly cemented his position within British intelligence. World War II was raging, and the Allied nations relied on brilliant minds to protect their secrets and coordinate complex operations across continents. Philby, with his combination of intellect, charm, and ideological conviction, quickly distinguished himself as an officer of exceptional skill. To MI6, he appeared incorruptible, disciplined, and brilliant. To Moscow, he was nothing short of a gift, a man with unparalleled access to both British and American strategic secrets. In a world where a single misstep could cost lives, Philby's every action was both daring and perilous, a delicate balancing act that he managed with uncanny precision. In 1940, Philby was assigned to Washington, D.C. as part of the British liaison mission with American intelligence. This position placed him in the inner sanctums of U.S. military and intelligence planning at a critical time when coordination between allies was essential. He attended briefings, reviewed sensitive strategic documents, and sat in meetings with high-ranking officials who trusted him implicitly. It was an extraordinary opportunity to gain information that would directly benefit the Soviet Union. And he seized it. Every handshake, every casual conversation, every document he reviewed became an instrument of espionage. Philby's intelligence reports to Moscow were meticulous, detailed and devastating in their strategic significance. Allied operations were exposed, agents were compromised, and the Soviets gained insight into the very heart of American and British intelligence planning. Philby's ability to operate undetected in Washington relied on both his social mastery and his understanding of human psychology. He was supremely charming, effortlessly blending into the elite circles of diplomats, military officers, and intelligence operatives. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he acted, and subtly guided conversations to elicit information. Those around him saw a man of unwavering integrity and brilliance, completely unaware that every interaction was carefully calculated to benefit Moscow. He became a master of misdirection, convincing colleagues that he was working tirelessly for the Allied cause, while secretly orchestrating one of the greatest betrayals in modern espionage history. During this period, Philby also deepened his connections with fellow members of the Cambridge spy ring, including Guy Burgess, Donald Maclean, and Anthony Blunt. These men were similarly educated, ideologically committed, and strategically positioned within British intelligence. Their coordinated operations allowed them to manipulate entire networks of intelligence with astounding subtlety. Philby acted as the linchpin, providing Moscow with a continuous stream of intelligence while shielding his comrades from suspicion. The effectiveness of this network rested on trust, discipline, and ideological unity, and Philby's brilliance was in maintaining all three simultaneously while living a life of absolute duplicity. As Philby's influence grew in Washington, he faced ever-increasing risk. American and British intelligence were aware that sensitive information had been leaking, but the source remained a mystery. Investigators began tracing patterns and noticing that the leaks often coincided with Philby's access to information. Yet no concrete evidence existed, and Philby had already cultivated the perception of being untouchable. His calm demeanor, impeccable manners, and demonstrated loyalty created a shield that deflected suspicion. It was a dangerous game. One mistake could unravel decades of careful deception. The tension was palpable, and Philby thrived under it, using it to refine his craft and test the limits of human trust. Philby's work in Washington also demonstrated his strategic genius. He understood not just what information was valuable, but also how it could be used to maximum effect. Reports he passed to Moscow were selective and calculated, often framing intelligence in ways that would mislead or delay Allied operations. This manipulation allowed the Soviets to anticipate moves, protect their agents, and exploit weaknesses without exposing themselves. His work directly contributed to the survival and expansion of Soviet influence during a time when the post-war world was beginning to take shape. Yet every successful act of espionage further entangled him in a web of lies, deception, and moral ambiguity that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Despite his growing power, Philby's personal life reflected the pressures of his dual existence. He married and had children, maintained friendships, and cultivated social appearances that reinforced his public image. These relationships were carefully managed, both to maintain cover and to protect himself from emotional vulnerabilities that could expose him. Even in his private moments, Philby was calculating, balancing affection with the need to maintain secrecy. His psychological complexity was remarkable. He could show warmth and loyalty in one moment, while committing acts of profound betrayal in the next. This duality became both his greatest strength and his heaviest burden. After the war, Philby returned to London and began working in MI6's counterintelligence division, ironically investigating suspected Soviet agents while simultaneously shielding those he had recruited for Moscow. His rise through the ranks was now near unstoppable. Colleagues respected his judgment, relied on his expertise, and often consulted him on the most sensitive matters. Each promotion allowed him greater access to strategic planning and the inner workings of Western intelligence networks. For Moscow, Philby was now operating at the pinnacle of influence, directing information flows, protecting allies, and shaping the decisions of governments without ever being suspected. Yet suspicion was beginning to emerge in subtle ways. Intelligence failures, compromised operations, and the pattern of leaks drew the attention of British investigators. Philby responded with the precision of a master strategist, deflecting inquiries, redirecting suspicion, and leveraging his reputation as an unassailable officer. The psychological tension of this period cannot be overstated. Philby knew that investigators were closing in, yet he remained outwardly calm, continuing to operate as though nothing were amiss. Each day became a test of nerves, intellect, and social acumen. He was not just playing a game against his peers, he was playing against fate itself. Philby's daring and success created a paradoxical environment. He had become indispensable to both British and American intelligence, yet his very indispensability made him more vulnerable. Any misstep or overlooked detail could lead to exposure, arrest, or worse. Despite these risks, he continued to operate with remarkable audacity, sending intelligence to Moscow that would compromise agents, operations, and entire strategies across Europe and the Americas. By the 1950s, Philby's duplicity was both legendary and perilous. His brilliance ensured his survival, but the walls of suspicion were tightening with each passing year. As Philby's web of deception expanded, so too did the scrutiny of investigators and colleagues. The Cold War was intensifying, and every compromised mission brought him closer to exposure. Could one man truly outwit decades of intelligence expertise, or was the end of his double life finally approaching? By the 1950s, Kim Philby had reached the apex of British intelligence. He was respected, admired, and regarded as incorruptible. Colleagues praised his judgment, strategic mind, and calm demeanor. Yet beneath this polished exterior, the very organization that trusted him most was beginning to notice troubling patterns. Operations were compromised, agents were disappearing, and intelligence that should have been secure was mysteriously reaching the Soviets. Analysts began tracing these failures, and a chilling suspicion began to take root. There was a mole in the highest levels of MI6, a man who had intimate access to the most sensitive information. For Kim Philby, the most dangerous spy of his era, the game he had so carefully controlled for decades was approaching its most perilous phase. The first significant cracks appeared when members of the Cambridge spy ring began to draw attention. Donald Maclean, Philby's close friend and ideological comrade, was under surveillance by MI5. Rumors swirled about Guy Burgess's unusual travels and secretive behavior. Anthony Blunt, while more insulated, was also suspected of dubious activity. Each investigation into his associates threatened to expose Philby's own duplicity. He had spent years building a network of secrecy, protecting fellow Soviet agents and carefully manipulating British intelligence. Now, with colleagues under suspicion, Philby had to employ every skill he had learned: deception, misdirection, and psychological manipulation to prevent investigators from tracing the leaks back to him. In 1951, Philby himself was called in for formal questioning by MI6. The interrogations were subtle, designed to extract information without raising public scandal or compromising sensitive operations. Investigators were armed with fragments of evidence, anomalies in operations, reports of lost agents, and the circumstantial alignment of leaks with Philby's activities. Yet he emerged unscathed, demonstrating his remarkable ability to blend truth and lies. He feigned outrage, demonstrated loyalty, and leveraged his reputation to deflect suspicion. Investigators began questioning themselves. Could a man so brilliant, so disciplined, truly be a traitor? Philby's psychological manipulation was masterful. He created doubt in the minds of those investigating him while continuing to funnel critical intelligence to Moscow. The tension during this period was immense. Philby was walking a tightrope between discovery and continued espionage. He had to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics within MI6, manage relationships with his Soviet handlers, and anticipate investigative techniques. Every report he sent, every contact he made, was calculated to avoid detection. His dual life required constant vigilance. Even minor missteps, a glance, a pause, or an intercepted letter could unravel decades of deception. The psychological strain was immense, yet Philby thrived under pressure. He had developed an almost instinctual ability to predict the movements of colleagues and investigators, allowing him to remain one step ahead of detection. Meanwhile, American intelligence had begun exchanging information with MI6 regarding possible leaks. The combined scrutiny heightened the risk. Philby was now under indirect observation from multiple angles. Any misstep could compromise operations, reveal agents, and create a diplomatic scandal. For Moscow, Philby's value could not be overstated. He was a direct conduit to the strategies of both British and American intelligence. The stakes had never been higher. Philby knew that exposure could mean imprisonment, execution, or the end of his carefully cultivated career. Yet, in the shadow of mounting suspicion, he continued to operate with audacious skill, sending selective intelligence to the Soviets that allowed them to maintain an edge in the unfolding Cold War. By the late 1950s, the pressure intensified. MI6 and MI5 had compiled growing circumstantial evidence suggesting a high-level mole. Internal memos, intercepted communications, and the sudden misfortunes of Allied operations all pointed toward a single individual, though no one could yet prove it. Philby remained outwardly calm, attending briefings, guiding operations, and maintaining the image of the perfect officer. But behind closed doors, he was increasingly aware that the net was closing. Every investigation into his friends, every suspicion voiced in hushed corridors, brought him closer to a crisis that he could not control. In 1961, a major turning point arrived with the defection of Burgess and McLean to the Soviet Union. Their sudden disappearance shocked British intelligence and immediately intensified scrutiny of all Cambridge-connected officers, particularly Philby. While his colleagues were shaken and investigations ramped up, Philby remained outwardly composed. He leveraged the chaos to reinforce his innocence, maintaining the illusion of loyalty while quietly arranging contingency plans. His ability to remain calm in the face of mounting danger was a testament to his intelligence, training, and psychological discipline. Yet even he could not ignore the growing reality. The authorities were closing in, and time was running out. By 1963, Philby faced the ultimate decision. The walls of secrecy were no longer distant. The net of suspicion had reached him. The British government, under mounting pressure from international allies, was ready to act decisively. Philby, realizing that his capture was imminent, orchestrated a calculated and dramatic defection to the Soviet Union. Using the pretext of official travel, he vanished, leaving a stunned MI6, bewildered American intelligence, and a scandal that would dominate headlines for decades. His defection was not just a personal escape, it was a seismic geopolitical event. Western intelligence scrambled to assess the damage, and the Soviets celebrated one of the greatest victories in espionage history. Even in the immediate aftermath, Philby's story captivated the world. He had lived undetected for decades, infiltrating the highest levels of intelligence, compromising entire networks, and outsmarting some of the most skilled operatives on the planet. Yet in Moscow, the life he had risked everything to reach was not without its own costs. He was celebrated, but he was also isolated. He had abandoned family, friends, and the very nation whose secrets he had betrayed. The exhilaration of espionage was replaced by reflection and perhaps a profound sense of solitude. The story of Kim Philby forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How much power can a single individual wield in the shadows? Can brilliance justify betrayal? And even after achieving the ultimate escape, is a life built on deception ever truly free from the consequences of one's actions? The final chapter of Philby's life would reveal the full weight of his legacy in ways both celebrated and tragic. In 1963, Kim Philby vanished from the streets of London, slipping into a world he had long served in secret. His defection to the Soviet Union was not just a personal escape. It was the culmination of decades of clandestine maneuvering, careful deception, and ideological conviction. When he arrived in Moscow, the KGB welcomed him as a hero, a master of espionage who had outwitted the Western intelligence agencies at the very heart of their operations. Yet the life that awaited him was far from the thrill of fieldwork, the rush of coded messages, and the delicate dance of social manipulation that had defined his career. He was now in exile, a man celebrated but profoundly isolated. Philby's life in Moscow was one of comfort and recognition, but also surveillance and solitude. The Soviets provided an apartment, a steady income, and opportunities to engage with fellow intelligence operatives. Yet they also watched him closely. Even as a valued agent, he was a foreigner in a land that demanded loyalty above all else. He gave interviews to journalists, recounted his ideological journey, and spoke of betrayal and loyalty in eloquent terms. To the world, he was a defector, a symbol of Soviet triumph over Western intelligence. Yet privately, he grappled with the immense personal cost of his decisions. Family, friends, colleagues, and the nation he had pretended to serve were all left behind. The exhilaration of espionage had been replaced with the quiet weight of reflection. Philby's psychological complexity became more apparent in exile. Publicly, he maintained the narrative of ideological commitment, portraying himself as a principled agent of the Soviet cause. Privately, however, he was haunted by isolation, the constant awareness of living under surveillance, and the consequences of the lives he had affected through his betrayals. Intelligence colleagues in Britain and America debated his motives for decades. Was it ideology, ego, thrill-seeking, or a combination of all three? Philby himself rarely offered definitive answers, preferring to frame his actions in moral terms that justified betrayal as service to a higher cause. Yet the contradictions of his life, the warmth he could display, the trust he could earn, and the destruction he caused, illustrated the human cost of a life built entirely on deception. The long-term impact of Philby's espionage cannot be overstated. For Britain, his betrayal forced a complete re-evaluation of recruitment, counterintelligence practices, and operational security. Entire careers were derailed, networks dismantled, and missions rendered useless. For the United States, the leaks Philby provided to Moscow compromised operations and shaped strategies during the earliest stages of the Cold War. Analysts and historians agree that his work likely delayed Western responses to Soviet initiatives, reshaped intelligence priorities, and created a climate of pervasive mistrust that lasted for decades. He had demonstrated that even the most sophisticated intelligence agencies are vulnerable to human ingenuity and ideological conviction. Philby's life in Moscow also offered insight into the Soviet approach to celebrating and controlling foreign assets. He was treated as a hero, yet he was isolated from true decision-making power. The Soviet Union valued him for his past actions, not his potential for new initiatives. He became a living symbol of the intelligence victory he had engineered, but was always a guest in the world he had served. Even as he lectured younger operatives, offered counsel, and enjoyed ceremonial recognition, he was reminded constantly that he was a foreigner, dependent on the state that had orchestrated his entire career from a distance. Despite this isolation, Philby remained intellectually active. He reflected on the intelligence world, wrote memoirs, and engaged in discussions with historians and journalists. His accounts offered unique insight into the operations of both MI6 and the KGB, though they were inevitably colored by self-interest and the need to justify his life choices. Analysts studying Philby found him fascinating, a man whose brilliance and duplicity could manipulate the highest levels of government, yet who remained deeply human, flawed, and occasionally conflicted. He embodied the moral ambiguities inherent in espionage, where ideological commitment and personal survival often collide. Philby died in 1988, having lived over 2 decades in Moscow, witnessing the waning years of the Soviet Union he had once served so loyally. His death prompted reflection in intelligence circles worldwide. What did his life teach about trust, loyalty, and the vulnerabilities of even the most secure institutions? Western intelligence agencies undertook widespread reforms, emphasizing internal security, counterintelligence, and psychological assessment of officers. Historians and journalists examined his life as a cautionary tale of ambition, ideology, and moral compromise. Philby's story became a touchstone in understanding the human dimensions of espionage, the personal, psychological, and political consequences of betrayal. Even decades later, Philby's legacy resonates. He remains infamous not just for the information he delivered, but for the audacity, discipline, and intelligence with which he did so. He demonstrated that one individual, operating in the shadows, could alter the trajectory of nations. He also revealed the profound human consequences of such a life: isolation, psychological strain, and the perpetual tension between ideology and morality. In studying Philby, we confront uncomfortable truths about trust, deception, and the fragility of systems designed by humans. The story of Kim Philby is more than a tale of espionage. It is a study of human ambition, ideological devotion, and moral complexity. It shows how brilliance can be weaponized, how trust can be manipulated, and how a single individual's choices can reshape history. Philby's life forces us to ask difficult questions. Can intelligence ever be foolproof? Can loyalty and betrayal coexist in a single human heart? And finally, what is the price of brilliance when it is devoted to deception? The answers remain as shadowed as the world in which he operated, but the lessons of his life echo through the corridors of power, history, and human understanding. If this story of betrayal and espionage captivated you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the secrets behind history's most shocking spies. Smash the like button if you were stunned by Kim Philby's audacity, and leave a comment telling us your city from where you are watching this. Your support helps bring more thrilling tales of intrigue and deception straight to your screen. Remember, in the world of spies, trust is a weapon and deception is an art. Click that bell and join us as we explore the shadowy secrets that shape the course of history.